now we could talk. Yes?
Is it, if you know the original, is it the tamer of the horses or the breaker?
Breaker, tamer, yeah. I mean, the same.
It's two different things.
Yeah, but it's somebody who makes horses which are not, hard to ride, rideable, whatever. The civilizer of horses. So this is literally what he is. Again, you have to understand that in some sense, Homer, it's like in case of Shakespeare, as we shall see later. Shakespeare invented half the words he's using. It's literally so. It's like there were no word before, and then Shakespeare, and still half of the words are not known to English-speaking people. You have to study to acquire mastery of Shakespeare, and you must. The same thing, amazing thing, is true for Homer, even at the time, say, of Plato, 400 BC. Well, he went to school probably 15 years before that, but let's say 400 BC. 399 is death of Socrates, very important date. So if we look at that time, Greeks couldn't read Homer. It was ancient Greek for them then. You had to study with a special teacher who would explain the meaning of words. There were professors specializing in interpretation of Homer. You could make really good money traveling around Greece giving seminars on Homer. Of course, there were recitations where you would recite Homer, probably with a lyre, but there were people who would explain the meaning of Homer, the meaning of words, the meaning of actions. Right? How do we know? Plato describes such a person in one of his dialogues. We'll talk about it later. So we're dealing with a very complicated thing. It was not easy for Greeks even then. Civilization is not easy. You have to make an effort. Whether it's, things which are worth knowing are hard. Shakespeare is hard. By the way, was hard for the people he invented half the words, and they didn't have any dictionaries. Right? So it was hard even then, but it was worth it. People say, oh, it was easy for people at Bach's time to understand. No, it wasn't. It never is. If something is easy, it's a good indication, if it's accessible, that it's probably not worthwhile. This is my experience. Right? I don't want to name names. I already got this critical response that I'm abusing some famous modern epics. But they are very accessible. They're very simplistic. Right? What we shall see that Homer is very, very complicated. Not just linguistically, not just the words. You really do not know the meaning. Sort of what does it stand for? Right? All of us, the Greeks at the time, say, of Plato, they wanted to know who is a good guy there and who is the bad guy. There are no easy answers. It's hard. It's fairly easy to know who is the largest guy. By the way, not Achilles, Ajax. He's enormous. This is easy. But good, bad, we don't know. And as we shall see, the picture is highly ambiguous, intentionally, if you like. And in simple things, like when you watch a Hollywood movie, you always know, at least by the end, who is the good guy. Or there could be somebody who pretends to be bad, but he's really good. He's a secret good guy, pretends to be an evil magician. Or it could be the other way around. But it's always this clear separation between good and bad, which you see in popular culture. And there is nothing like that in Homer. One person is bored. Yes?
When did the text of Iliad solidified in written form? Was there like, I would assume at first it was just a spoken word, and then it kind of...
Do not. The question is when the written text of Iliad was solidified, when it was established. There are people who believe that Iliad is based on oral material. Nobody seriously believes that the entire highly sophisticated text could be passed along as a raw oral form. So from my point of view, it's pretty self-evident for anybody who studies, unless you want to publish a dissertation which is very original. It's pretty self-evident that Iliad, when we talk about Iliad, whatever material it was based on, it clearly was based on some material, was a written thing. It was codified. We know that at the time of Pisistratus, the 6th century Athenian tyrant who established these recitations of Homer, the text was written down. That we know. I mean, not from that it wasn't written down before, but there was a canonical text for state-sanctioned recitations. So that establishes clearly when it existed. It existed before, no question about it. Okay. But then it was sort of codified in scholarly editions which were produced by scholars in Alexandria, Library of Alexandria, and spread and again divided into 24 books, and commentaries produced, and certain verses marked as spurious. And it was comparable to the modern critical editions, sort of by, say, 2nd century.
But how sure are we that these more modern editions didn't change it completely or like made it up 90%?
Oh, no. That we are certain, because remember, there are lots of quotations in Plato, Aristotle, Thucydides. Do I have to go through the whole list? So we know, it's like, how do we know that the, say, text of the New Testament did not change dramatically from the 1st century? Because there are quotations by the 2nd century fathers of the church, 3rd century fathers of the church. You could reconstruct the entire text from them, which sort of tells you, no, it didn't change. There might be this and that variation, but it's substantially that text. The same from Homer. And in case of Homer, we have fantastic amount. It's not like somebody like Tacitus, a Roman historian, where we have effectively one manuscript. We have multiple manuscripts, and we have huge amount of papyrus fragments in Egypt from sort of different versions. Not complete, but if you find 3 words here, 3 words there, and they are the right words, yeah, we have the text. So yes, you could argue, and people do, about this line or that line. But substantial sort of identity of Iliad between us and classical Greece. Again, I'm sure there is a dissertation which says, oh, of course not. No, I mean, there is a scholarly consensus. Nobody in his right mind doubts that. It's, again, you have to understand things, nobody is going to rewrite War and Peace. Is it, I mean, by the way, if you look at some editions, for example, even if you look at the version of War and Peace, as it was published in the famous 90-volume edition of complete works of Tolstoy, it's not quite, you could argue this is not quite the correct text. The edition, subsequent editions, like in 20-volume edition of Tolstoy in whenever it was 62, has a better text than supposedly canonical text of 90 volumes. It doesn't matter. These are tiny variations. Right? So yes, there are things scholars work, and I'm not trying. There are lots of people who spend time trying to reconstruct authentic text. When we're going to be talking about New Testament, some of you are asking about syllabus. That's why I don't want to publish syllabus. He's going to be talking about New Testament. But we will. We will discover that there was a great number of scholarship trying to reconstruct the text. The great names of people like Westcott and Hort, the great British scholars which came up with the ways you evaluate manuscripts. And they came with a beautiful edition. Does it make much difference? No. Is it a great scholarly activity? Yes. And there is an institute in Germany which keeps refining the text. And there's this famous Nestle edition of New Testament. It's all wonderful, and nothing. Your view of Christianity is not going to be changed. Your view of Homer is not going to be changed. Your view of Aeschylus is not going to change by studying the most recent critical editions. I'm not trying, again, let me be very strong. I admire these people. They spend their lives trying to figure out where comma goes. It's wonderful that you could spend all your life sort of worrying about these things. But it's not that important. Again, there was parallel thing. Scholars in Pune, India, came up with this critical edition of Mahabharata. Nobody in India knows about it. Nobody reads it. Is it important? I mean, the grandmothers who tell stories for sure do not read the critical edition. Actually, even the people who make 94th installment TV production do not read critical edition. It's just, I'm not diminishing the great work of people in Pune. They were wonderful, but it's not, sort of when somebody tells you that there is some secret thing, no. Especially in terms of what we're trying to figure out, civilization. It doesn't matter. It's the received text. That's what matters. That's what formed us. Sort of, even if there would be some manuscript found in Greece, which is different, it's not the manuscript which affected our civilization. It's this Iliad. Yeah, this Iliad, which affected. Yes?
I'm curious about the, I don't want to call it the canonicalization, but the sense in which these books became sort of the center of how educated people were educated, but I guess particularly in ancient Greece. You mentioned some Athenian tyrant. So this is the official, you should know about these works.
I think the question is, sort of, was it imposed by the government that, let me simplify the question. You will see. I'll answer your question. So the question is, was it imposed by the government? How did it become canonical? And as I think is going to be the case with most books which we are going to encounter, it first becomes canonical and then it is imposed by the government. By the time you cannot, if President Obama tells everyone to read some obscure book, nobody will read the book. If he tells everyone to read Harry Potter, people say, oh, we're already reading Harry Potter. So, this is going to be our canon. If he tells people to read Shakespeare, I'm not sure, right? It would be wonderful if he did. Again, I think that the government should play a role in maintaining civilization. Right? I'm very happy that, for example, French government takes such a great care of preserving the French language through government policy of preserving French culture. I think it's a disgrace that some countries forget their culture. For example, there's a great government activity which you should know about in the United States. There is a sort of government-funded, it's not government-owned, but government-funded activity. It's funded by National Endowment for Humanities, are publishing a thing called Library of America, canonical texts in good form, sort of an archival paper, very inexpensive for what it is. And I think this is wonderful that the government, and there were some people saying, why should the government subsidize elitist activities? It's wonderful that we have good editions of Mark Twain. It's wonderful for the first time in history we actually have a wonderful edition of complete novels of William Faulkner. I could go on through the thing. I mean, it's an enormous activity, and I disagree with some of their choices. And they do try to pander to the market by including science fiction. I'm going to get angry letters. But it's wonderful. It's wonderful that they do that. Right? So, yes.
Just on the same topic, my guess is that besides the main plot, the war and the conflict between the Greek leaders, what happened that the book had practically all Greek mythology kind of embroiled and embedded in the book. So if you go to any, for example, you want to have any description of a Greek myth will have a reference to Iliad or something. And for example, that Ellen, you will see the description, why Ellen and the story about Apple.
No, you will not. No. Again, he is not trying to write. Some people would later on, trying to write manuals of mythology. So he occasionally uses these snippets, but he presupposes that you cannot reconstruct it at all. Greek mythology is not reconstructible from Iliad. Iliad is a great poem about the anger of Achilles. It's not, yes, it is going to mention this and that, but usually when he mentions, you're going to sit there with your mouth open saying, what is he talking about? Right? It's not, again, the educational value of Iliad in terms of Greek mythology is relatively minimal. Its educational value in terms of eternal things, what is good, what is bad,
I'm thinking that it has roots in those mythology.
It does.
And therefore was really close to the people who share this mythological kind of set of myths.
It's related. The amazing thing, it's enormous literary complexity. Okay? It's much more complex than any, the characterizations are better. What I want to sort of say that what is amazing that we're starting at the high point. From that point, it's only down. You say, what about Tolstoy? No comparison. What, is Tolstoy a good writer? No question about it. Compared with Homer, nothing. Because Homer manages to touch something very deep. Again, why I'm talking about it, it's precisely because I don't think it's optional. Tolstoy is. I'm going to get so many angry letters. But, I have to tell you, it is different. There is a profound reason why Lenin canceled classical education. A person who studies Homer would hesitate to go and build bright future. The idea of bright future was central to Lenin, all of you know. Yeah? And if you study Homer, as Greeks did, they would be very skeptical of possibility of bright future. As we shall see, as we study other Greeks, all of whom came from Homer, they knew that there is fundamentally something wrong with us. We are not to trust our leaders, and even more so, we are not to trust ourselves. Right? It's just cannot be done. This is why Bolsheviks were so insistent on sort of eliminating that. It's actually started even before that. I mean, I don't want to go into the discussion of Russian educational system, but the classical education is dangerous because it makes people question certain things they want us to believe. Right? It tells us that, yes, we should be very loyal to the state, but the state could be truly corrupt. Yes, we should be very loyal, I'm really going to get into trouble, to our company. But there has to be a difference. We have to know that the fundamental goodness cannot be identified with our corporate goals. There will not be a next lecture. Or our corporate goals or our political goals. We have to distinguish however I vote, I have to remember, if I read Iliad carefully, I will know that this is not the ultimate goodness I vote for. It's a pragmatic choice. Right? And this is what Greeks were taught by Iliad. This is why the fact that we have such a book at the core of our civilization should make us different. Of course, it doesn't, because, first of all, we don't read it, and then it's a very harsh message. Right? And there are forces which do not want, not just Lenin, which do not want us to hear this message. Right? But it is there. Homer is very clear about Achilles and good are not identical.
What was the impact of Homer on the neighbors of the early Greeks, sort of the pre-Hellenic kind of era?
Pre-Hellenic, the question is, what was the impact of Homer on other surrounding Hittites, people of Troy? We don't know. There obviously nothing we find. If we look, for example, I just told you an Egyptian story about, but where do we find it? In Herodotus. It's the Greeks who report Egyptian story about it. Egyptian sources are entirely silent about Helen being. I'm not doubting Herodotus' report, but you have to understand. Okay, if I go to Bulgaria, I'm sure that if I talk to people, they will often explain to me that many good things originated in Bulgaria. Or Russia for sure. Every nation is very proud that they invented everything. They have great this and great that. The same thing with Egyptians. Herodotus goes to Egypt and they say, oh, never mind, Helen was here. The most beautiful woman, of course, was in Egypt. Did they hear about Helen before? I'm not sure. Right? So there is no, at least hieroglyphic evidence is not there.
What I meant in terms of a better understanding of the Greeks, and especially in case of warfare with the Greeks, is that?
Okay, it's a very good question, and I will answer it in spite of the fact that my lecture after next was supposed to answer it. But, we're not going to, I'm going to preempt myself. Early in the 5th century, Greece was under major, terrible attack. There was this empire called Persians. And this is like, United States against Grenada. A tiny collection of city-states versus enormous empire, which covers everything from Egypt, by the way, at that time Persians control Egypt, and Iraq, Iran, Turkey, the entire Israel, what else is there? All the world, in some sense. And here are Greeks. And there's no such country as Greece at that time. They're just tiny states. And Persians decide, we have to get rid of these guys. They always cause trouble, and they do. Not major, but they, foment rebellions and whatever. They create trouble. And there is this attack. They come twice. First they defeated Marathon, and then they defeated, this great war when all the Greece fights them, the battles of Salamis and Plataea. And the remarkable thing about it is, how do Greeks react? Okay, if you fight a war for your survival, you would hate these guys, wouldn't you? We do, like Nazis, Japanese, they're all bad guys. So Greece wins the war against terrible, evil empire, the enemy of freedom. I'm not sarcastic. This is a dictatorial empire. This is many democratic states with different forms of democracy, with high culture, with everything. Yes. They burn Athens. This is, my tongue stops. They burn Athens. People have to watch it. There's this guy, Aeschylus. He has to see it because he is one of the people on the ships fighting at Salamis. While Athens are burning up there, he sees it's burning. His city is burning. By the way, he also fought at Marathon. His brother was killed. Yes? And then he becomes a playwright. He gets a job as a playwright. The greatest playwright maybe of all times, Shakespeare notwithstanding. His first surviving play is called Persians. It's about suffering of Persians, king and his mother and other guys, while they're invading Greece and get defeated. I cannot imagine any other society reacting like that. Right? That is, you defeat this terrible monster. You save your families, you save your cities. And then you're concerned about how they're feeling because they're defeated. Where else? Right? It's like, in modern terms, I don't know. An Israeli author writing a play about last days of Hitler and his profound psychological sufferings. Huh? Greeks could do it. Yes? So this is where we start. In many respects, we start at a point far higher of the point we are at. Yes? And I claim that this book starts us there. We shall see again that one of the conclusions when I am done with next lecture, if it happens, that the conclusions is that maybe the hero is actually Hector. Maybe Hector is a good guy. Well, even that is not going to be so certain. The enemy hero is the hero. And you say, Alex, you're making it up. Maybe I'm not making it up. Because when we look at the way Iliad is going to be received through history, this is a standard sort of reception. Yeah, probably Hector is a better person. The enemy leader. This is Greek poem about Greeks fighting Trojans. And the best guy in the poem is the enemy guy. Who else could do that? We shall see. Again, you are forcing my, but I cannot say, I'm not going to answer. It's not what I do. My tongue cannot be stopped, as I'm sure you observed. More questions? Comments? Anybody wants to defend Harry Potter?
I would like to defend Xerxes. He was no match for Hitler. His goal was not to destroy the Greek population. They were trying.
He burned Athens. He destroyed Athens, burned completely, and he would probably kill all the Athenians. What did they have to do to survive? Yes, all of them had to move out. Why? Because they wouldn't have survived. Now, I'm not trying, by the way, anybody, please don't write to me that I like Hitler. He's one of the most despicable people in history. And I strongly disapprove. Truly, I'm not a Hitlerite. Or what? Thank you, guys.